Excellent, excellent. Yeah, I just wanted to welcome you, Ahmed. And I see that your name is probably somebody else, not your name here
That's
in
true.
the chat. Yeah.
Um, that's my spouse. Let me change that right
Oh,
now.
okay, okay,
There we go.
perfect. So
Good
yeah,
catch.
so I'm here with Ahmed Kalkan. He's a super guy, phenomenal guy. I met you probably a year ago, right? Yeah,
Yeah, it's been about a
it
year.
seems about right, right? Yeah, it's crazy how time flies, when you're having fun. so,
True.
uh, so yeah, I mean, I don't want to tell too much about your story because your story is such a big story, and I want people to get to know you better. I do know some of the stuff that you're going to talk about, but I still wanted to ask you, like, please tell us your story. Please tell us how you got where you are. You are a real estate mogul here in Texas, but nobody or not many people actually know you. Let's not say nobody, but like not many people know you. So I just want to get to know you better through my people.
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, thank you for having me. I mean, I always love having a conversation with you.
Yeah.
When we met, it was great just from the start. So I like that, we're keeping in touch through the year. First and foremost, I mean, my name is Ahmet. I'm part of a family office in real estate. And typically, real estate is like most people's passive income. For us, it's the sole focus. I'll go as far as saying we're hyper focused in real estate. We don't really mess around with any other thing. And I think that makes sense because when you look at the, returns you can get on real estate, I don't know what other business avenue would justify making real estate, a passive income and put it on the back burner. When you look at the cost to benefit analysis, I mean, real estate, yeah, every wealthy person is in real estate to some capacity. So that's what we're all in on.
Perfect.
Um,
How
it,
many units
it,
do you have? Just so people know.
It fluctuates. At the peak, I think we were around 11,000. And right now we actually started my own second company, and we just opened a fund for $150 million.
Okay.
And with that, we are looking to, branch out a second avenue and, acquire properties through that fund as well. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great to hear.
Um,
I didn't know that.
we started early 90s, late 80s. My father, came to the States for his education. He got a sponsorship from Turkey.
Mhm.
And it was actually economical crisis at the time to where, the unit he was living in, his landlord bankrupted. So the government reached out, the RTC actually, and they said, look, you can become a landlord instead of a tenant, and the government will guarantee your loan. So
Mhm.
he's like, okay, great. And through that, he ended up purchasing the duplex he was living in one unit, renting out the other. And he liked it, he didn't pay any money. He just assumed the loan. And
Definitely.
all of a sudden, he's making what he was making at the university teaching full time. And over here, he's just collecting a check once a month from his tenant next door that he's neighbors with. So he quit his job and he just went on a loan assumption spree. And first year, he acquired like 16, 17 houses, pretty much all just loan assumptions, very, very little cash involved.
Yeah.
And then he sold all that and he bought a small apartment complex, 60 units. And the logic behind that was, I mean, to take care of 16 houses, you have to commute all over town. With an apartment
Right.
complex, it's all there congregated in one location, so it's easier to manage. And that
Right.
kind of became his business plan. Since he was always, doing loan assumptions or, for lack of better words, buying the most affordable houses on the market, it the territory comes with distress. It comes with high crime, vacancy issues, and he ended up specializing in that, specializing in stabilizing distressed assets.
Right.
And that really proved to create a lot of value because, if you think about it, if you buy a brand new home that has nothing wrong with it, and what are you going to do to the house to increase its value? Everything's already brand
Right.
new. So if
Yeah,
you buy
what's
a
the value?
fixer
What is the
upper,
value that you're gonna add, right? Yes.
yeah, if you buy a fixer upper, I mean, whatever you do is going to contribute to the value. So you can't mess up buying, a fixer upper, cheapest house on the market. In fact, the saying goes, you want to buy the cheapest house in a rich neighborhood. So the comps, the properties that you're neighboring with will pull up your value along with you. So anyways, we focused on apartment complexes and, like I said, we grew from a duplex all the way up to 10, 11,000 units.
Perfect.
And
Okay, let me. That's a perfect segue to this question that I wanted to ask you. So
sure.
most people never scale up more than 100 doors. So what
Sure.
specifically did you do differently, and you and your company, of course, to get to 11,000 units?
Well, first and foremost, we didn't treat real estate as passive income. That's the most important thing. I mean, all day, every day, we worked in real estate. We gave it our full, undivided attention. I do want to say, I mean, real estate is not rocket science. It is very straightforward, very logical. You have an apartment, you need to find a tenant. You found a tenant, you need to make sure that the tenant's happy. You need to take care of the tenant. At the beginning of the month, you need to collect rent. With that rent you collect, you need to pay your mortgage. That's really the essence of all of it. I mean, there's very few industries out there that gets any simpler than real estate. So the first thing we did is we went and focused on real estate. We didn't treat it as passive income. And the way that we scaled, the financial model was you buy a fixer upper, whether it's a house or an apartment complex, and you stabilize it. And what I mean by stabilizing is, you make sure there's no crime. You make sure that your occupancy is high. You make sure that your tenants are good tenants, paying tenants that, aren't disturbing the community, they aren't disturbing their neighbors, calm, peaceful environment. And what that does is it increases the value of your property. Like let's say you buy a property at 50% occupancy, like an apartment complex,
Yeah,
and you bring it up to 90% occupancy. That rent cash flow directly correlates to the value of the property. So then you go back to the bank and you're like, hey, I want to refinance. And the concept of refinance, for just the general public is typically, let's say the bank will put 75% of the loan of the property value, and you'll put 25% cash. So let's say the property doubled in a matter of a few years. Well, you go back to the bank and you're like, hey, protect your 75%. The money you gave me no longer correlates to 75% because you gave me, let's say it's $100,000 property. You gave me 75,000. Now it's $200,000 property. So, it's called a cash out refi. So
yeah,
then the bank puts down more money. And the great thing is when you refinance, you can take that money and you can buy the second property. So that's all you do. You buy a distressed property,
of
you
course.
stabilize it, you refinance it, pull cash out, and then you go buy the next one. And it just continuously develops. I mean, it did take, 20, 30 years to get to that point, but
Yeah,
it's just a cookie cut process.
of course. You just have to keep at it, right?
Yeah, you just keep at it, keep at it.
Yeah,
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 absolutely.
and in that sense, because not many people get to that point, even after 30 years, right? I mean, just a lot of people, they're okay with keeping one or two properties, and they don't really go through the whole process that you described because they lack systems, they lacked opportunity, they lack knowing the market, they lack a lot of things. So when did you realize that this wasn't just real estate for you, and you were actually like building an empire, which basically you have?
I think really what gave us that realization was when we started to invest in multiple cities. Because, yeah, when you're trying to scale to those sizes, we came from a smaller city called College Station, where Texas A&M University is located, because my father was teaching there. So
Yes,
that organically was the city he started investing in. But there's not always, supply available. There's not always a killer deal to take advantage of. So the neighboring city, Houston, I mean, it's an ocean compared to a pond. Over there, there's, deals any day of the week. So I
yeah,
really do think that you need to be in a supply-rich environment if you're looking to scale, or you need to be comfortable investing in multiple cities. So we invested in College Station, we invested in Houston, we invested some in San Antonio. So that's one of the things. And really, I think it's a mindset more so than anything else. You know, every person should have a business plan. You know, when you're starting a business, what's your dream? What are you trying to accomplish? If you're
Sure.
trying to grow it as much as possible, every decision you make will be tailored towards achieving that goal. If you're like, hey, I want to keep my, a 9 to 5 job and have a couple houses on the side, that's fine. And that's exactly what you'll set off to accomplish. But if you're going off and saying, hey, I'm quitting my job at the university, I'm going all in on real estate, and we're going to, push this as hard as we can, then that's what you'll achieve. So it starts with the mindset, Luis. And then you break it down to, okay, what market should I be in? Or what's my market like? What opportunities are in my market? And you go from there.
Perfect, perfect. I like that answer. That's a great answer because it's true.
Yeah, yeah.
Let me ask you one else. So what's one mistake that you see, multifamily or real estate investors making over and over again?
That's a great question, especially considering the times we're in right now where there's higher interest rates. See, most people in real estate work with a mortgage, they acquire debt. Very rarely will somebody go out and buy a property 100% cash out of their pocket. I mean, a typical apartment complex is, let's say, $10 million. Dollars. Who has $10 million dollars sitting in cash to go and buy it? Well, then, if that's the case, nobody would be able to be in real estate. But there's tens of thousands of people in real estate. And the reason they're able to be in real estate is because they get debt. So when everyone has debts, everyone is going to be sensitive to federal interest rates. So if the interest rates start going up, so does your mortgage, unless it's a fixed rate. But even fixed rates, you pay a higher interest rate than a normal adjustable rate because you're fixing the interest rate to protect yourself. Anyways, so one of the mistakes that I witness people making over and over and over again is they get too ambitious. They get ahead of themselves. So, for example, a property that's, let's say, again, $10 million. You go to the bank and you get a loan for this, and that's called a loan to value. You know, what percentage is the loan of the value of the property? And typically it's 75%. Typically, it can be 65, it can be 80, whatever, but average is 75%. When you start developing a track record, when you start succeeding and the banks start, trusting you more and more, you can negotiate that leverage. You can push it to 85%. You could push it to 90%. And then that 10% equity, you won't put it cash in yourself. You go and raise equity. So now your debt has interest on it and your equity has interest on it. So now you have all of this interest that you need to somehow cycle with the property. Now, when the market turns over and the interest rates skyrocket, that becomes a really heavy burden. So the mistake that I see people making more and more is, I'd say, risk analysis, keeping the property breathable, keeping the property sustainable, and not leveraging it to the max to be able to scale as fast as possible. This is absolutely a marathon. And, there was dime a dozen syndicators, 2021, 2022. And syndicators are basically people that go out to the market and they raise capital. You can become a syndicator today. You can enter real estate today without a penny in your pocket and just raise capital from left and right. And that's what many, many people did. Many, many companies did. They syndicated. Well, they bought these properties at the top of the market at a premium. And then when the market turned over, the properties became insolvent. And now you're no longer able to service the debt. So that's what I would say. I would say ambition, being overly ambitious, pushing too hard, not letting your property breathe. The golden rule in real estate, Luis, is positive cash flow. That's the golden rule. The moment you violate positive cash flow and you're squeezing every drop you can out of that property to the point where it's suffering, it's no longer able to breathe financially, that's when you get your first red flag.
Totally true. Totally true. And it's also touching on a point that I wanted to also ask you about, which is, with the rising interest, as we are in an environment where we have high interest rates, right? So, with that uncertainty, what's your best hedge strategy for that?
So the concept is you're going to borrow money from the bank. at a certain percentage of the value of the property, let's say 50-50, or let's say 75-25, whatever. And then you're going to pay interest on that amount you borrowed. So you look at how much money your property is going to generate or the property that you want to buy. You know, it's called cash flow. It's called NOI, net operating income. You look at what the property can sustain. Okay, if I borrow this much debt at this interest, can my property sustain? And you do a risk analysis. You just underwrite your property, meaning you do your homework on the property, and then you go out to the bank and ask accordingly. You know, if in an environment where the interest rates are so high, it would be suicidal to also try to maximize the leverage. You know, getting 80% leverage at 8% interest rate is a lot harder to pay compared to 50% leverage at 8% interest rate. So you really need to mix match between how much debt you're willing to borrow at the current interest rate. Because, sure, another option is you go hunt different avenues that are charging different interest rates. I mean, there's agencies like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, they'll charge you a different rate interest. There's HUD financing that'll charge you the lowest interest rate amongst basically any competitor. And then you have bridge lenders, which they're very short term, 1 year, 2 year loan, just and they take more risk because they capitalize on the moment that you take over the property, but they charge higher. So you really need to look who you're going to go get the debt from and how much leverage you're going to put on the property. It's just basic homework, Luis. You know, you need to do your homework. If you go out to the market and you're like, I'm going to borrow as much money as I possibly can, so I put as little cash as I can, that may not work out in these high interest rate environments.
Right, which is basically what you were saying before, right? It all depends on how leveraged you are in these deals, right? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I don't think I see a lot of people making that mistake of thinking about the past, being the past being, for the past, I don't know, 5 years or so, or before that, where interest rates were at the lowest, right? And people were thinking, they're still thinking that, yeah, so if we could go to those times again. And again, it's just what you said. It's just a matter of underwriting with the tools and the current environment that you're in right now. Meaning, we have higher rates right now. That's not going to go away overnight if it goes away. And that means that we have to underwrite the deals that we have with those parameters, right? And that means that if we have to be leveraged, which we'll have to, we get a loan anyway, we just have to play it safe. We don't have to over leverage, as you said before, right? That's
Absolutely.
all the game that it's about.
I would encourage people not to speculate, not to try and time the market. You know, you're riding a wave, and you need to understand that you're dependent on that wave. In this scenario, you're dependent on the market, and you don't have control over the market. For example, I can make a prediction that I believe interest rates will continue to fall going forward. I believe the worst is behind us. I believe we've reached the peak of highest point of interest rates that we will see in the near future. And from here on out, interest rates will start to come down. Now, if I bet all my self-worth on that prediction, I may be right, but look at this scenario. Not only do you need to be right, you also need to time the market by when, at what amount. And that starts to get really tricky. Just like in the stock market, you're timing that, okay, for example, if you're playing the options market, you're not only timing what or predicting what direction the stock is going to go, you also have to predict between what time frame. And that gets really risky. So as you said, just play it safe. Look at the reality. Today we're here, and make your assumption based off of today's reality. Don't try to time the market. Don't complicate this. Like I said at the beginning of the conversation, real estate is not rocket science, and it's not meant to be rocket science. It is very simple, very straightforward. Keep it that way. And if you do keep it that way, you can scale. I mean, we're an example of that. We don't have this, massive technology and science behind what we do. It's very straightforward what we're doing. This is the price of this property. It should be this value. Okay, if I do this to this property, it'll become that value.
Right.
Now, I need to go find a reasonable amount of debt to put on this so I can leverage it, so I can utilize my cash effectively. That's it.
Totally true. Totally true. Let me ask you a little question also. The last time that we spoke in person, you said that you guys were looking to acquire a bank. Is that still in the horizon? Are you still looking to do that? I mean, like, why a bank? Is that, a strategic move that you're looking for right now?
Yes, it's a strategic move. We have honestly we have no interest in banking. We have no interest in necessarily giving out millions of dollars of loan and earning interest. That's not the purpose of a bank. The bank is really front and center in this whole real estate environment, in this whole real estate world. The amount of power that a bank dictates, who to give a loan to, who to allow to be able to purchase a property, they have all the reins in their hand. Not only that, they have something far more valuable, in my opinion, and that's information and that's knowledge. You as a real estate investor are staying outside of the financial world, but you are tied to the financial markets. You need to be able to work with the financial markets, but you're not in the financial markets. You're simply going to them asking for a loan to be able to do your business. But if you have, one hand in real estate, one hand in banking, then that bank can have more effective relationships with other lenders, and that can help facilitate to make your life easier. To an extent, it's just you're vertically and horizontally integrating, but the focus isn't let's go become a bank. The focus is how do we streamline real estate? Not only is a bank important, having your own title company. That is a huge lifesaver. There are so many deals that came to the brink of falling through because of things getting delayed at the title company. Because when you try to buy a property, you give an offer, and that offer has a certain amount of money and a deadline. And more times than not, it'll come down to the wire to be able to close on time. And if things get caught up at the title company just even a day or two late, the whole deal can fall through. So if you have some influence in your own title company and you can reroute your resources and you can bring in more staff to get this deal through, that'll work. But if you're, engaged with some other title company that you have no affiliation with, they have their own schedule, their own listings, and their own closings. You're just another face in the crowd that they're trying to close on. So you don't get any priority treatment. So having your own title company, having your own bank, having your own insurance agency, all of the components that revolve around real estate that you can have some control over will help make real estate more efficient. It'll drive your costs down. It'll increase your speeds. And I don't want to, make it sound too crazy and too big for, just the general public that's trying to get into real estate. I'm not saying, if you're getting into real estate, you should go buy a bank. But my strategy is to make real estate as efficient as possible, lower my costs, increase my income as much as possible. And at the stage that I'm at, it makes sense to dabble into other businesses that I'm affiliated with to make my real estate work more flawlessly.
True, true. And
Yeah.
and you know what? That reminds me of a friend of mine who is also a business guy, and he tells me, Luis, every time that you have a business, look for vertical and horizontal opportunities, and try to make those things like cost centers to you. I mean, instead of actually making cost centers, actually turn them into profit centers, and that's basically what you're talking about, just get
Absolutely.
into those partnerships or actually make your way into those areas, so those cost centers become profit centers for you, and now they're gonna expedite things for you. They're gonna make them leaner. Costs are gonna be reduced, and profit is gonna increase, in the whole
Absolutely.
operation.
Absolutely.
And who
And
benefits? The investors, right? I mean, because it's what you said. Not everybody, and I'm sure that not everybody is going to have the same opportunities that you guys have because of the knowledge and the muscle and the power that you guys have. But people like outside that environment can benefit because you are benefiting.
yes, absolutely. And you touched on a good point here that we are not a one-man show. I mean, we have investors, we have banking relationships. This is a whole group cooperating together to accomplish this. So if you're starting real estate from scratch, I mean, first and foremost, you don't need all the cash to go in. You go find a bank. And even if you're still lacking on the amount of cash that you do need to go in, you can go find investors. It could be friends, it could be family. You can just, there's crowdfunding websites where people will invest in your property. So you don't have to shoulder the whole weight by yourself. And that being said, when you do accomplish to buy a property, your primary goal is to take care of your investors and make sure that you're paying the bank. The real estate will take care of itself. The real estate will appreciate over time anyways, but you need to keep the bank happy. You need to keep your investors happy. And the only way to do that is to make them as much money as you can. And the best way to do that is to drive a more efficient operations, which is when you get into integrating with different, you could partner with other companies. You could open your own company. There's many ways to do this. But if you look at the greats, the greats of the greats, John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, they have all done this. They had a focus. Andrew Carnegie's steel business, John D. Rockefeller, petroleum industry, kerosene. That was their focus. But in order to make their operations as efficient as possible, they would get into side quests. They would get into side industries that are directly affecting themselves. For example, a transportation of the kerosene for John D. Rockefeller, big issue. So he would start to compete with the railroads. Dude, you're not in the railroad business, but it matters because it impacts his business. So this is how everybody does it. All the greats do it, and we need to learn from that, and we need to, copy their tactics.
Totally true. Totally agreed. Let me ask you something that you touched on just a little bit before. So how important is marketing and branding for what you're doing right now?
I'd say the single most important thing that a human being has on this earth, aside from their faith, would be their name. I think your name, your reputation, your credibility matters just about above all else. Now, if you don't have, a popular name, if you're just entering real estate, that's perfectly fine. You start from somewhere. For example, my friend, he just started real estate this year and he bought one house and then he flipped it. Now, that second house, he was able to get a loan for much easier than he did the first time because he worked with the same bank and he paid them off in 6 months. It was a construction loan, paid them off in 6 months. The bank's like, wow, congratulations. You just closed on your first house in 6 months. Here, I'll give you another shot. And they gave them a second name. So now he's developing that relationship, that credibility, that reputation. Now, when he closes on his second house, which is out in the market for sale right now, he already finished the renovation. So that's 2 houses in 1 year. Now he's going to go back to the bank and say, look, I paid you off again. Give me this time enough loan for 2 houses. Instead of going one by one, I want to go 2 by 2. And then from there, you start expanding. So I think branding is absolutely important, especially in our day and age where social media and the internet is, a core component of our lives. You are going to be known whether for better or for worse. So you might as well influence that by branding yourself. And marketing wise, marketing is important from the prospect that people out there are looking for someone to work with and they simply don't know anybody. So if you market your company or if you market your brand, you're reaching out to people that are looking for an opportunity and it'll be easier for them to find you.
Exactly. Yeah, beautifully
Yeah.
said. Let me ask you something about that too. So when you're looking at a deal, how much weight do you think you put on the story that you're telling your investors?
Well, it
Talking
depends on
about
if they're
marketing
repeat.
and branding, of course.
Yeah. It depends on if they're repeat investors or if they're new investors. Of course, a new investor wants to hear what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you're doing it. For that, you need to, take your time and explain the whole roadmap. And, 9 times out of 10, these investors are not in real estate themselves. They have, a high cash flowing business, like let's say car sales, and they need a place to park their money that's going to pay them more than 3 to 5% interest in comparison to putting it into a CD account. They're like, I just want a more handsome return on my savings account rather than keeping it into the bank. So those people that really have no affiliation with real estate might be willing to invest into real estate because you're offering higher returns than the bank would just by keeping it in a savings account. So for new investors, yeah, you need to take your time. You need to show them around. You need to explain the whole business model, and you need to answer any and every question all day, every day. I mean, it's all about making your investors comfortable. Now, the repeat investors, they've already been through that. And if they have been satisfied with your performance, then they will reinvest because at that point, really the whole conversation piece that they're wondering is, can I trust you? And am I going to make a return on my money? That's really the two questions that all their questions are revolving around is, do you know what you're talking about? Is my money safe with you? And am I going to make money by working with you? That's all they're trying to answer. So once they have made money with you, you've already instilled that trust in them and you've already confirmed that, yeah, working with me is profitable, then they'll become repeat customers, repeat investors.
Right, right. Uh, so let me ask you something about that too. I know because I mean I've known you and I actually met your dad too. That you've done pretty much all of that the work that you've done, inside Kalkan Capital, you've done it without being front and center, as opposed to like for example like Grant Cardone, where he's always like there and you know about him because he's like posting all the time, right? So you've done all this without being front and center. Uh, as other real estate influencers. Is that intentional, or is that something that you could work on, or is that something that you're seeing as lacking? I mean, like, how do you see that?
So, first and foremost, marketing and branding, as we said, is very important. So, everybody should have some degree of ambition to be recognized in the market, not for popularity. It's simply good for business to be known. Because if you're not known, nobody's going to be able to invest with you. Nobody's going to be able to work with you. People are not going to know to buy your property or to sell you their property. So branding and marketing is important regardless. So in the case of Grant Cardone, what he's doing is absolutely admirable. And I believe that that's the path that everybody should be taking. Now, we didn't take it, and there are pros and cons to our business approach. In our case, we are the sole owner, and we till recently we didn't come with investors with raising capital. So when you're 100% owner of the asset, you're reaping 100% of the proceeds. So you're much more from an equity perspective, you have much more equity. In the case where you're doing crowdfunding or syndicating, you're giving, 80% of the money away to your investors and you're getting 20%. In our case, you're keeping 100% of your proceeds. You're not giving anything away because you don't have any partners or investors. Now, the downfall of that is it'll take you 30 years to get to 10,000 units. Buy with your own money, refinance, take that money, buy the next one, grow organically. With crowdfunding or syndicating or raising funds, you can raise, $100 million and you can go buy 10,000 units in a matter of months. On the flip side of that, when you sell that, you're not making the proceeds of the sale of those 10,000 units. You're going to give bulk away, or what we call the lion's share, to the investors. Now, does that really matter? I don't think that really matters because at the end of the day, people don't ask you, how much equity do you have? Or how much money do you have in your bank account? They ask the size of your company, your power. And when you say I have 10,000 units, nobody's going to ask, well, what percentage ownership do you have in that company? Nobody takes that far. What really matters is, do you know what you're talking about? Are you trustworthy? And if I give my money to you, are you going to give me a return? That's what everyone's thinking about. So when the moment you say, I'm running 10,000 units or 20,000 units or 30,000 units, that checks that box in their mind. So I do believe Grant Cardone or other, famous real estate investors that are front and center in marketing and branding, I believe their path is much quicker to growth. And our path, although it's slowly but surely, the benefit with that is you have a much larger equity share. So if we, a syndicator that has 10,000 units and somebody who's done this organically that has 10,000 units and they both sell their portfolio, the one who did this organically that doesn't have any partners or investors, obviously he's going to have much more money at the end of the day compared to somebody that's been raising capital. But I don't think that really matters because at the end of the day, they both walk around saying that we operate 10,000 units and that's enough to continue business. When I say this is not for, the purpose of showing off or ego or none of that. Power matters, size matters. This is what helps you get better loans, better interest rates. Somebody that goes to the bank trying to buy their first unit, somebody that goes to the bank with 10,000 unit portfolio, it's a completely different conversation taking place. You know, you can be as
Definitely.
humble as you want to be, but your size is going to matter in business. Your power is going to matter in business.
Definitely, definitely, for sure, for sure. And I thank you for that really detailed explanation. Let me ask you to kind of conclude our podcast, and again, thank you for your time. So, what are your current challenges, and what's your next move inside, Kalkan Capital, and as a company, and personally too?
Yeah. So, I, as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I started a second company, my own company, and right now my focus is launching that off. We have a fund. We've raised capital. So at the stage I'm in, I'm looking to buy properties. That's the stage I'm in. And once we buy properties, which we have several under contracts expected to close, once we buy those properties, my next challenge is going to be to stabilize them, to make them fully occupied and cash flowing as quickly as possible. That's going to be my next challenge. And then once they've reached that, then you go and you refinance that. So as I've been mentioning, this whole path that we're following, I'm at the process of, okay, we've raised capital. Now we're buying the properties. As soon as we buy the properties, we need to stabilize these properties and move on to the next. And actually, for everybody listening, this is the absolute best time to be buying properties. This is the best time in the market to where you can go out and you could find a good deal because interest rates have been so high for these past number of years. There are a lot of properties out there that are being sold at a discount because their owners are not able to operate them. And since they're not able to operate them, they're having to sell them at a discount, which, their loss, your gain. So this is the best time to be entering real estate. And that's, I'm practicing what I preach. I'm going off and purchasing new properties as we speak. And I intend to do that all throughout 2026 until the market becomes more competitive and the prices start rising again. So this is the lowest point that you'll have for, in my opinion, the foreseeable future. And let's not speculate. We don't know how the market's going to be. But as we sit here today, this is the best time in the market to be going out and buying properties.
Perfect, perfect. And let me ask you two couple of questions, like the last questions of this interview. Um, do you see marketing and perception playing a role in your future capital or deal strategy?
Yes, absolutely. I think one of the most core components in business is going to be your marketing and your branding strategy. Because if you're not known, you're not going to be able to find people, and people are not going to be able to find you. And in this day and age, you need to be working with a team. I mean, you need to have investors, you need to have banking relationships, you need to have other real estate investors that you can buy and sell from. You need to have vendors that know you. I mean, if you start real estate right now and you go start buying from Home Depot, you're paying a premium. You're paying what they're charging to every other person. But if you have a relationship with Home Depot and you have a commercial account with them, they immediately start giving you discounts. The only way that's happening is because you've marketed yourself as a company and the size of your company and what you're doing. So, yeah, I mean, not being known, not having a brand, not marketing yourself is going to cost you money. Now, it's not detrimental. Somebody that's starting real estate today with no name, no brand, that's perfectly fine. Just like my friend who started real estate this year. I mean, in 1 year, he bought a house, he stabilized it, he sold it, he made a handsome return. Now he bought a house, he stabilized it, and he's selling it again. Great for him. And hopefully next year, he's going to go from 2 houses to doing 4 houses, and then from 4 houses to 8 houses. And before you know, he has his own crew doing this for him. So you don't need it to start real estate, but you need to keep an eye on it and say, okay, throughout my journey in real estate, this is something that I do want to pay attention to. I do want to have my social media accounts. I do want to have these relationships with lenders and investors. Branding will help you. It's not going to kill you, but it's going to help you.
Definitely. Perfect. And the last question, what's the legacy that you want the world to remember Kalkan Capital by?
Honestly, our whole purpose at this point is really more so from a social service standpoint, because our business strategy, just from how we started, trying to find the most affordable houses in town, that comes with its inherent problems. They have crime issues, lack of services, they're deteriorated, they're distressed. So when you stabilize that, you're providing a service to that community. You're reducing the crime, you're making sure that they have running water, they have air conditioning, and you provide service. And we've just ran with that idea. So we try to buy, distressed areas, properties, or neighborhoods in town that, they don't have their basic needs met, where you can call 911 and it'll be a very delayed response. Or there's certain neighborhoods where you order a package online, you buy a package, and they will not deliver to that neighborhood just because of the high crime. We've invested in neighborhoods where school buses will not drop off the children on that street. They will drop them off a couple blocks beforehand because the crime is too high, and the school district doesn't want to take that risk of bringing the school bus in. So when we take over those communities and we reduce the crime and we stabilize it, and now you have school bus after school bus dropping off the kids not on your street but in your property. Okay, that's a success. Really, what we determine success is, are kids outside able to play? Are women able to go to the grocery store down the road at night without being concerned for their safety? If you see kids playing outside, to previously it was an absolute ghost town because no parent's going to let their child step outside without supervision. You see that transformation, that's a success. So I'd say our legacy is the ability to provide services to the underserved, for lack of better terms. Yeah.
That is perfect. Amit, I want to thank you for being, a podcast, interviewee, and I want to thank you for being my friend, and I want to thank you for your time because I know it takes time to be here. We actually had made this commitment a few days earlier, but I know you were busy, so we had to do it today. So that's great.
Yeah, thank you for accommodating me. I mean, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And whenever you're in town, let's grab some lunch.
Definitely, let's do that. Let's do that, and let me just pause the recording right here, and we'll talk a little bit.